The Queen spends a night in hospital for what the palace describes as preliminary investigations. She returned to Windsor Castle yesterday following medical advice that she have a few days' rest. We'll have the latest updates on the Queen's health, also this lunchtime. A woman dies and a man is injured after the film star Alec Baldwin fires a prop gun on set. Scientists warn the government to take action now on COVID restrictions or face harsher measures later. But in Australia, relief at last as the strictest lockdown of them all is finally lifted.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Geraint Vincent.
Good afternoon. The Queen is said to be in good spirits after an overnight stay in hospital earlier this week. A statement released late last night from Buckingham Palace said that following advice to rest for a few days, she was admitted to hospital on Wednesday afternoon for some preliminary investigations. But the overnight stay was said to be for practical reasons, and she was back at her desk at Windsor Castle yesterday afternoon. The Queen is there now and is said to be undertaking light duties. Juliet Bremner has the latest.
Carrying out her role as head of state alongside the Prime Minister, the Queen was smiling and apparently in good health during an event at Windsor Castle less than 24 hours before we have now learned that she was taken to hospital for what's being described as preliminary investigations. Belatedly, the palace confirmed, following medical advice to rest for a few days, the Queen attended hospital on Wednesday afternoon for some preliminary investigations, returning to Windsor Castle at lunchtime today and remains in good spirits. But this statement was only released after it was revealed by the Sun newspaper. Splashed across the front page, details of an overnight stay at King Edward VII Hospital, which officials had apparently wished to keep secret.
Ah, there you are.
I am. Your Majesty.
Good evening.
Shortly after this virtual conversation with New Zealand's Governor-General, it was confirmed that the Queen was cancelling a trip to Northern Ireland. It's understood that officials felt the 95-year-old monarch was entitled to medical privacy. Since it was a short stay, they didn't feel it was necessary to make an announcement.
We're now in a phase where how much the palace are going to tell us, the people and the media, about what's going on is clearly being worked out, and their instinct, and I think it reflects probably the Queen's own preferences, is to not say very much and to keep things back unless they become significant.
The Queen's schedule has been hectic this month. Starting with tree planting in Scotland, she's already attended more than a dozen engagements across the UK. Known to dislike any kind of fuss, she was seen accepting a walking stick to make her more comfortable during a service at Westminster Abbey last week. We are told that she's now back at Windsor in good spirits and undertaking light duties. The overnight stay at hospital was said to be a cautious approach and not COVID related. The problem is there may now be questions about how much of this official palace narrative can be trusted. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
A woman has died and a man has been injured after they were shot when the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin fired a prop gun on a film set. The accident happened in New Mexico, where the star is filming his latest movie, Rust. Halyna Hutchins, the film's cinematographer, was airlifted to hospital where she later died. Production has now been halted. Carrie Davis has more.
Surrounded by real police tape, this film set is now the centre of an investigation.
One person is dead, another is injured after an accident on a movie set where Alec Baldwin fired a prop gun.
The actor reportedly seen in tears following that incident that happened during the filming of the Western film Rust.
It's a film Alec Baldwin is both starring in and producing. A spokesperson of his says there was an accident on the set involving the misfire of a prop gun with blanks. Director of photography Halyna Hutchins was killed. Film director Joel Souza is being treated in hospital. Helena Hutchins posted this video from set just 2 days ago. She was sharing the highlights of her life. The comments now remember her in death. Actor Dwayne Johnson is among those to have left a tribute. He said, "I'm so sorry. Rest easy. My love and strength to your family." Elsewhere, Joe Manganiello, who recently worked with Hutchins on the film Arch Enemy, said, "An incredible talent and great person. I can't believe this could happen in this day and age. Gunfire from a prop gun could kill a crew member. What a horrible tragedy." Fatal incidents on sets like this one are rare, but not unheard of.
There's a misunderstanding sometimes out there that quote-unquote blanks are harmless when in fact they still have an explosive charge, and depending upon the kind of blank round that's in the weapon, that explosive charge can include a blast that goes out that alone could harm someone close in range, and perhaps some wadding or material that explodes out of the gun as well.
Production on the film has been halted. Whether it will resume is uncertain. For now, family, friends and the film industry are grieving the sudden loss of an exciting talent. Carrie Davis, ITV News.
Scientists have warned that if measures are not taken sooner to slow down the rate of COVID infections, more stringent and longer-lasting measures may be necessary. Documents released in the last few minutes show advice from scientists to the government. Number 10 has so far resisted calls from the medical profession to reintroduce restrictions. New figures show that 1 in 55 people in England had COVID last week. Well, our political correspondent Libby Wiener is in Westminster. Libby, what have these documents told us?
Well, essentially, the scientists seem to be saying that if the government doesn't do more to try and curb our behaviour and stop the spread of COVID, then much worse could be in store in the winter months. Now, earlier this week, Kwasi Kwarteng, the business secretary, ruled out categorically the chances of any lockdown this winter. But if you read these documents, the scientists are saying effectively that what the government is advising now, which is get a vaccine and the rest is up to us, that simply isn't doing enough to drive down infections. And it was the same line that the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss was suggesting the government was pursuing in an interview earlier today.
Well, what the difference is this year versus last year is because we've had the vaccine, the rates of hospitalisation and deaths are much lower than they were last year. So it's right that we continue to keep things under review, but of course it's important people are able to make their own decisions given that we have seen a dramatic drop in the rates of hospitalisation.
Well, it's true that the vaccines that we are using have been extraordinarily effective, but it's also true that not everyone has had the vaccine. A big campaign is being launched today to try and encourage people to come forward for their second vaccines and their boosters. But failing that, it is very problematic. The ONS survey, as you mentioned, shows that 1 in 55 people in England have the virus at the moment, and we are only just coming into winter. I think there will be increasing pressure on the government to change course and perhaps implement Plan B sooner rather than later.
Libby, many thanks. The care sector has been one of the hardest hit by the pandemic, and now its regulator, the Care Quality Commission, is warning of a tsunami of unmet need as providers struggle to maintain staffing levels, which means that potentially thousands of vulnerable people will be left without the care they rely on this winter. We spoke to one woman who needs looking after every day but is struggling to find long-term care.
I don't know how I'm going to cope if I don't have help. I could get a real... It's still early enough. I've still got 6 weeks to go when I've got help. After that, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, the government has announced an extra £162 million to recruit more staff.
It is concerning there are labour shortage. There is massive competition for labour. That's why we've made this announcement today to put extra money in. It's very unusual that the government would put extra money in, into what is effectively a private sector. But we're doing that because we do recognise that there are these short-term challenges between now and March.
Well, I'm joined now by Joanna Mitchell, who runs a care company in Kent. Joanna, hi there. Is that new money going to be enough, do you think?
No. Money is, you can throw money at the problem, but it isn't going to solve everything. What the care industry needs and what the ministers need to understand is the image of what we do needs to be lifted. We need to make it an industry where people want to come and join and not just be a carer, which is what you hear quite often.
I mean, I understand what you're saying about the image of the industry having to change. What's your most urgent problem right now, though, in the short term?
Staff. Yeah, we need staff. People have worked their socks off for the last 18 months. They're burnt out, they're exhausted. We're asking our staff to work, unnatural hours, day in, day out, week in, week out, and it's just not sustainable.
And while your staff are in that position, you must have more immediate concerns for the people you're looking after, because they're the people who are most immediately affected.
They are indeed. I've just personally handed back 13 care packages because I can't offer continuity and a safe delivery of care. So I've had to sit and judge whose life is more important than the other so that we can make those cutbacks and be able to look after the remaining staff I have and the patients that we deliver care to.
Goodness me, what an awful position you find yourself in. So you must have very real worries about the welfare of some of the people you're looking after, as we go into the winter season.
Absolutely. We specialise in end of life, so we deliver care to people that have chosen to stay at home or to be discharged home so they can die in their own surroundings with their family. I'm turning down hospital discharges because we just cannot facilitate those packages of care. It doesn't, I don't sleep easy at night. I haven't got the right to be judge and jury on who is more important than the other. Yet that's the position I'm in, day out.
And I'm really interested in what you say about the kind of status of social care workers in the healthcare system. In the long term, that's got to change. I mean, how do we do that?
Well, for a start off, politicians down to the general public need educating that we are not home helps. We are not unskilled workers. You've got carers, men and women in homes in the community who are doing controlled drugs, stoma care. They're doing catheter care, peg feeding, administering medication by peg. Nurses do this in the hospital and they're called skilled workers, and they've worked hard for that. Carers are expected to do it in people's home, in care homes, and we're called unskilled workers. And I find that so offensive. People still think we're the home help, we go in, we do a bit of washing up and sit and have a chat. Let's educate people, let's make training better, invest in, I include myself, providers like myself, if we're getting extra money, it must go into people, not our pockets. It must go into training.
OK, Joanna Mitchell, we're grateful to you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
Still to come on today's Lunchtime News, the world's longest lockdown finally comes to an end in Melbourne. But before that, having a stammer can be incredibly difficult and frustrating. The condition stops people from being able to say certain words or might mean them repeating them over and over again. It can be particularly challenging, of course, for young people. 8% of children have a stammer. Well, today is Stammering Awareness Day. A new campaign's been launched to break the stigma around stammering with a petition to call for more representation in the media. Take a look at this.
But signing it will insist we hear stammering voices on TV, radio and film. Not just on International Stammering Awareness Day, but all year round. Who knows?
Well, I'm delighted to say that we are joined now by the actor and former rapper Scroobius Pip, who himself grew up with a stammer. Scroobius, great to see you. I guess one of the aims of this new campaign is that we all stop thinking of stammering as a problem.
100%. It's not a problem that needs to be fixed. It's something that some people have. Years ago, in the news in particular, there was a big push to have a broader range of accents and voices represented. And stammering should be part of that. It shouldn't be seen as something that's, a problem that needs to be fixed. It's just part of how people talk.
And what are your memories of what it was like as a kid?
It was really tough. It was incredibly tough. And there were very few people on TV or in the media that represented me. I always remember hearing of one actor who had a stammer and being so inspired that all of a sudden there were career paths open to me that I didn't think I could have. Everything I've done in my life now has used my voice, whether it's from being a rapper to a podcaster to now acting. And as a kid, I certainly couldn't see that being an option. But hearing of this one actor that had a stammer was enough to give me that open that door, I guess.
Yeah, and you chose professions where speaking is quite important. I wonder, Scroobius, if that was actually a way of overcoming your stammer.
Yeah, I wonder. I definitely feel there was a removal of the feeling of restriction, and the more we can represent that in TVs, like in adults, 1% of adults have a stammer, but I don't see 1% of characters having a stammer, and not necessarily a stammer that's their defining feature. I was lucky enough, I did a show called Out of Her Mind earlier in the year, and they happened to use a take in which I stammered, and it meant the world to me because it wasn't a key part of the character, it wasn't referenced or mentioned, it was just that person happened to stammer. And I've had so many people reach out to say how much it meant to them to see that, rather than it being the King's Speech or whatever, where it's this big thing that they're trying to overcome, and that's the pure drive of the piece.
Other people's reactions in everyday life are so important here, aren't they? Can you tell me something about, what's some advice? What's the best thing to do if you're having a conversation with somebody who's got a stammer?
You've completely nailed it there, in that when it comes to representation, people who have stammers are well aware of stammers. It's people who don't have them that maybe feel more nervous. And it's really simple. All you need to do is pause and give us time to say what we're trying to say. We don't need help. We don't need any kind of assistance. Just allow us that time and space. And I think that's what everyone needs these days, really.
Well, Scroobius, it's been a pleasure talking to you this lunchtime. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
And you, thank you for having me on.
5 police officers from 4 forces are facing disciplinary action over messages shared on social media about Sarah Everard's killer. Ms. Everard was kidnapped and killed by a serving officer earlier this year. The police watchdog said the officers will be subject to misconduct hearings. Former Labour MP and peer Lord Frank Field has revealed that he is terminally ill. The 79-year-old spent 40 years as the Member of Parliament for Birkenhead before leaving the party in 2018. In a statement read out in the House of Lords, he said that he'd recently spent time in a hospice. And a number of dogs stranded by the volcanic eruption on La Palma in the Canary Islands appear to have been rescued by a mysterious organisation. The group, who call themselves the A-Team, left a message saying the animals were okay. Footprints were also seen nearby. And finally this lunchtime, we've all had our fair share of time in lockdown over the past 18 months, but spare a thought for the people of Melbourne in Australia, which has been dubbed the world's most locked-down city. They've endured a staggering 262 days of the toughest restrictions. Today, though, their latest lockdown came to an end, and as the clock struck midnight, celebrations began. Sangeeta Kandola has more.
This is the sound of freedom across the skyline in Melbourne at midnight. Happy people howling and cars honking as the world's longest lockdown was lifted, the final state capital in Australia to reopen.
I tell you what, there's a lot of thirsty people here tonight, and there'll be certainly a lot of thirsty people out all over the weekend.
Oh, mate, it's a humble beginnings. It's fantastic.
They have endured a seemingly endless lockdown, 6 in total, more than 260 days under restrictions in this city down under. Finally reaching the crucial 70% double dose target, allowing old freedoms to return.
This is what we do. We're people. We just like to be doing hair, mixing, talking, socialising.
As hospitality, hairdressers and retail opens up, restrictions are limited to those double-dosed and the number of people allowed indoors and out.
To all of those who are down there in Victoria today, enjoy the day. It's going to be tremendous being reunited again.
Cheers.
The hope now, of course, is that they can continue to enjoy the simple things without lockdown looming again anytime soon. Sangeeta Kandola, ITV News.
And a reminder of our main stories this lunchtime. The Queen is in good spirits after an overnight stay in hospital earlier this week. Buckingham Palace said that following advice to rest for a few days, she was admitted to hospital on Wednesday afternoon for some preliminary investigations. She was back at her desk at Windsor Castle yesterday afternoon.
We're now in a phase where how much the palace are going to tell us, the people and the media, about what's going on is clearly being worked out, and their instinct, and I think it reflects probably the Queen's own preferences, is to not say very much and to keep things back unless they become significant.
A woman has died and a man has been injured after they were shot when the Hollywood actor Alec Baldwin fired a prop gun on a film set. The accident happened in New Mexico, where the star is filming his latest movie, Rust. Helena Hutchins, the film's cinematographer, was airlifted to hospital, where she later died. And the care regulator has warned of a tsunami of unmet need as providers struggle to maintain staffing levels, which means that potentially thousands of vulnerable people will be left without the care they rely on this winter. The government today has announced an extra £162 million to recruit more staff. And that is it this lunchtime. Charlene will be here with the evening news at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather, but from everyone on the Lunchtime team, bye-bye.